sheets, tapping angrily against the glass windows of the cafe like impatient fingers. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee cup, trying to keep her mind from spiraling back to the memory of 2 months ago, a memory that still burned. But tonight was different, because tonight she had the keys. Literally. The clinking sound of the antique brass keys in her coat pocket was like thunder against the silence of her past humiliation. It had happened on a humid evening 2 months ago, when her stepmother Cassandra, elegant as ever in her overpriced satin blouse and smug smile, had stood on the front porch and yelled loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "We don't have space for useless mouths. Your father and I agreed, you need to leave. This house isn't a charity." Her father hadn't even come outside. Not even when she stood there with her bags, silent tears running down her cheeks, heart bruised, soul crumbling. But Elena hadn't begged. She had looked Cassandra dead in the eye, wiped her tears with the sleeve of her worn-out hoodie, and said only 3 words, "You'll regret this." And then she left. No money, no job, no plan, only fire and grit. Elena had always been the quiet one, soft-spoken, observant, the girl people assumed wouldn't bite back. She had grown up adapting to every room she entered, shrinking when things got tense, smiling when it hurt. But that night changed everything. She'd found a spare room above an old bookstore that smelled of dust, ink, and forgotten ambition. The owner, Mrs. Doyle, had given her the key with a kind smile and a cup of tea. "Pay me when you can," she had said, her eyes knowing. Within a week, Elena had a job at a small design studio, answering calls, organizing schedules, and eventually, late at night, sketching her own concepts on the back of coffee-stained napkins. Her talent didn't stay hidden for long. Her breakthrough came one morning when the owner of the studio, Samira, walked past her desk and caught sight of one of her logo designs. She didn't say anything at first, just took the napkin and walked away. Elena had panicked, thinking she'd overstepped. But 3 hours later, Samira returned and handed her a tablet. "Design something real," she'd said. "Let's see what you've got." The next 3 weeks blurred into long nights, energy drinks, and trembling hands. But by the end of it, Elena had landed 3 big clients, all through Samira's connections and her own tireless work. 2 months later, she was part owner of the design firm. And last week, an elderly landlord, one who knew her from childhood, called to say he was selling one of his oldest buildings in the neighborhood, and he didn't trust just anyone to take care of it. She hadn't even asked what building. She just signed the papers. Only when she visited the address yesterday did she realize it was that building. The same building her father and stepmother had moved into when they downsized 3 years ago. The irony stung and thrilled her all at once. She hadn't planned this. She never meant to circle back. But maybe life had. And now, tonight, she stood on the sidewalk under the soft glow of the streetlight, her coat damp, her heart racing, not with revenge, but with a kind of poetic justice. She took a deep breath, then climbed the steps to apartment 3C. Her father opened the door. His face aged more than she remembered. A pause. A blink. His eyes landed on her. "Elena?" he asked, voice caught somewhere between disbelief and guilt. Cassandra appeared behind him, holding a wine glass, her expression curdling. "What are you doing here?" she snapped. Elena pulled the envelope from her coat pocket, thick, official-looking, with the building's new letterhead. She didn't smirk, didn't sneer, just handed it over. "It's a notice," she said quietly. "There's a new landlord. Rent is being adjusted to match current market rates. You'll find the details inside." She didn't wait for them to open it. She didn't need to. Her father took a step forward. "Wait, Elena, is this? I own the building now," she said softly, almost gently. "I thought it would be cleaner this way. No hard feelings, just business." Then she smiled, a sad, nostalgic sort of smile, and turned to leave. Behind her, Cassandra's voice cracked. "You can't do this. We raised you." Elena didn't look back. "You raised me to survive," she murmured. "And I did." The door slammed shut. But Elena didn't feel victorious. She just felt free. She walked into the night with the rain easing into a drizzle and a future she built with her own hands opening up in front of her. And that was only the beginning. The next morning, Elena woke before sunrise. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the silence, or the way her heart still hadn't fully come down from last night's quiet storm. The streets outside were wet from the rain, the sky still holding onto its sleepy gray. She sat on the edge of her bed, barefoot, staring at the envelope copy she hadn't mailed, the one she'd delivered herself. There were no regrets, but there was something deeper pressing on her chest. She had waited her whole life for someone, anyone, to stand up for her. But no one ever did. Not her father, not the relatives who saw Cassandra's cruel remarks as tough love, not even the neighbors who silently watched when she was shoved out. So she learned to carry her own weight, and then some. That kind of burden changes you. But this, owning the building they lived in, wasn't about punishment. It was about making peace with the past by rewriting her part in it. Not erasing the hurt, but outgrowing it. Elena stood, stretched, and padded into the kitchen of her apartment. A kettle hissed on the stove as she pulled out a worn notebook, the one she used before she could afford a tablet. Inside were hand-sketched plans for something bigger, her dream project. A boutique studio, a workspace for underdog artists, a place for girls like her, overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, to thrive. The first floor of the building she now owned had a dusty vacant space with boarded-up windows and a cracked tile floor. Most would have ignored it, but she saw potential. And now, she had the power to bring it to life. Just as her tea finished steeping, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Is this Elena? I'm Alex. We need to talk. It's about your father." Her chest tightened. "Alex?"
She didn't know anyone by that name.
Cautiously, she replied. "Who is this?" The dots flickered. Then came the response. "I'm his nurse. He collapsed this morning. He asked for you." She stood still for a full minute. She hadn't spoken to her father properly in years, not even before the eviction. Their conversations were mostly mumbled greetings, strained silences, and that one final betrayal. But now he was calling for her?
Why?
She didn't know if it was guilt, instinct, or some ghost of a daughterly reflex, but she grabbed her coat, keys, and headed out. The hospital was cold, sterile, filled with the same kind of mechanical kindness that hospitals always had. Nurses smiling on autopilot, quiet whispers in hallways, the subtle hum of machines that never slept. Elena found room 206, and there he was, her father, lying pale under white sheets, his face thinner than she remembered, cheeks sunken slightly, eyes fluttering open when he saw her. "Elena," his voice was gravel.
She stayed at the doorway.
"What happened?" He motioned weakly. "Can you come in?" She walked in slowly, every step like a question mark. "I didn't know who else to call," he whispered. There it was again, that passive sentence, as if he hadn't chosen to ignore her for years. She sat in the chair beside him, folding her hands. "I'm here now." He swallowed. "I was wrong." She blinked. "About what?" His eyes glistened.
About you.
"About what I let Cassandra do. About pretending it was easier to ignore than to fight for you. I should have stood up. I should have said something. But I was tired, and I was a coward." The words hit her like wind against glass, loud but fragile. "I don't want your apology," she said softly. He nodded, ashamed. "I know. I just needed to say it." Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, just thick with unsaid things. Then he added, "You bought the building. I saw the notice." "I didn't know it was yours when I bought it," she replied. He nodded again. "But you didn't evict us." She looked him in the eye. "Because I'm not Cassandra." His chest shook, a soft, tired laugh or a sob. She couldn't tell. Then he looked at her, really looked. "You've done well," he murmured. "You became everything we never believed you could." That stirred something deeper than anger, something older, rawer. "I didn't do it to prove anything," she said, voice trembling. "I did it to survive." He tried to sit up, grimaced in pain. "You're stronger than either of us ever were." She stood, brushed his hair gently off his forehead. Get some rest. As she turned to leave, he whispered, Elena, will you come back? She paused in the doorway. Maybe, she said after a moment, but not as your daughter, as myself. And with that, she stepped back into the hallway, heart thudding, not with bitterness, but with something like closure. But as she walked out into the morning sun, another message flashed across her phone. I know who you are, and I need to talk to you. It's about your mother. Her breath caught. Her mother? She had died when Elena was 5, or so she had been told. Elena sat frozen in the cab, her phone resting loosely in her hand. The message glared back at her like a spotlight in the dark. I know who you are, and I need to talk to you. It's about your mother. For a moment, she thought it was a scam, a cruel trick, some weird coincidence. Her mother had died in a car accident when Elena was 5. That's what her father always said. That's what Cassandra always repeated, lips pursed, as if saying the name left a bad taste. Her mother had been the ghost in the walls, never really spoken of, never truly remembered. But this message?
It cracked something.
She called the number. 1 ring.
2. Click.
A voice answered, male. Maybe mid-40s, calm but urgent. Elena?
Yes.
Who are you? My name is Daniel Ferris. I knew your mother. Very well. Silence. I think it's best we meet in person. I don't want to explain this over the phone. Elena hesitated. Why now? There was a pause. Because you're the only one left who deserves the truth. She met him the next evening in a bookstore cafe on the edge of downtown. It was dim, quiet, surrounded by the scent of old paper and roasted coffee beans. Daniel was already there, sipping tea. He stood when she entered, nervous and respectful. He handed her a folder, yellowed and thick. I was your mother's attorney, he began. And her friend. Before she died, she gave me this. Said to deliver it to you if something ever seemed wrong. But your stepmother intercepted every attempt I made over the years. Elena blinked. She what? Daniel nodded. I mailed letters, made calls, even visited once. But Cassandra threatened me with legal action if I contacted you again. Your father, he stayed silent. A quiet rage welled in her chest, slow and volcanic. What's in here? She asked. Answers, he said. Elena opened the folder slowly. Inside were photos of her mother, young and radiant, holding a baby Elena, smiling. Then letters. Dozens. Written in her mother's looping script. My sweet girl, if you're reading this, it means the life I wanted for you never reached you. Tears gathered behind her eyes. The letters told stories of a woman silenced, of a marriage that grew violent, of a plan to flee with Elena, but never succeeding. Cassandra had never liked her mother. And when she died, Cassandra stepped in immediately, not just to play mother, but to erase one. Elena's hands shook. At the bottom of the folder was a last-page note. I left you something. It's under your name. A piece of land. It was supposed to be your home one day. She looked up, eyes wide. What land? Daniel smiled softly. A cottage. Outside the city. Untouched for years. It's still in your name. She bought it secretly, when you were 2. She had plans to raise you there, just the 2 of you. Elena's breath hitched. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because some people fear your strength more than they ever feared your silence. That night, Elena drove out to the address. A dusty gravel path. Wildflowers. A rusted mailbox that still read A. Bennett, her mother's maiden name. The cottage stood small, hidden behind ivy and years of wind. But it was beautiful. Inside, it smelled like dust and memory. There were drawings, some by a child. Her drawings, carefully pinned to the fridge. And on the bedroom dresser, a box of baby keepsakes, Elena's first shoes, a hospital bracelet, a note that simply read, One day, you'll know who you are. She sat on the floor and cried for an hour. Not out of grief, but out of everything that had been stolen and everything she was now reclaiming. The next morning, Elena stood at the door of apartment 3C again. This time, She wasn't trembling. Cassandra opened the door. Well, look who decided to. I know everything, Elena said flatly. The words landed like a slap. I know you blocked the letters. That you silenced a dying woman's last attempts to reach her daughter. I know you pretended to care, when all you wanted was control. Cassandra's face fell pale. I should evict you, Elena continued. God knows, I'd be justified. Cassandra's voice cracked. You wouldn't dare. But I won't, Elena interrupted. Because I'm not you. She handed her a second envelope. Your rent has been adjusted again. Back to what it was before. Cassandra blinked. What? I'm not doubling it anymore. You're going to pay exactly what you used to. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Elena turned, and then stopped. But make no mistake, she said over her shoulder, voice calm, steady. This is the last grace you'll get from me. Back at the cottage 2 days later, Elena stood on the back porch in the evening light, sipping tea as the sun dipped below the trees. She wasn't the broken girl kicked out in the rain anymore. She was the woman who survived the storm and built something stronger from its ruins. 2 weeks passed. Elena spent every day at the cottage, cleaning, repainting, restoring the space. It didn't feel like a job. It felt like healing. Each brushstroke, each polished corner, was her way of breathing life back into what her mother left behind. She didn't expect company, but one morning, a black SUV pulled up the dirt path. A man in a dark suit stepped out, holding a leather folder. Elena Bennett, he asked. Yes, he smiled. I represent an investor. He recently discovered something in your mother's will. A co-signature. Your name. She froze. What kind of co-signature? The man handed her the folder. Inside was a contract dated 25 years ago. Her mother had invested in a company, small at the time, forgotten by most. The company? Renshaw Industries. Now worth billions. Elena blinked. What does this mean? It means you legally own 2.4% of it. It was in a trust. It matured this year. It's worth a lot. She stared at the paper. That number. That name. It didn't feel real. The man chuckled gently. You're wealthier than you know. She didn't rush to spend a dime. Instead, she walked to the back of the cottage, looked out across the land, and finally smiled. Not for revenge, but for growth. Later that evening, her phone buzzed again. It was Samira from the design firm. We just landed our biggest client, she said. And they asked for you personally. Who? Elena, Samira said, laughing. It's Renshaw. You're designing for your own company. Cassandra heard about it on the news. She didn't call. She didn't have to. Elena had already moved on. Because power wasn't in making others suffer. It was in never needing them again. 6 months later, the cottage didn't just look different. It felt different.
Warm. Alive. Safe.
Elena had turned it into a quiet retreat space for young women, artists, designers, and students who had nowhere else to go. A safe place for girls who'd been told they were too much, or not enough. She called it the Lighthouse. Not because it was by the sea, but because it gave people direction. She didn't advertise it. Word just spread. One of the girls, Ava, had been kicked out at 17. Another, Jaya, had fled from a toxic home. Each of them brought stories and fire. Elena listened, encouraged, gave them work, shelter, respect, just like she once needed. One night, after dinner, Ava asked her, "Why do you do this?" Elena paused. Because someone once told me I didn't belong, that I was just an extra mouth to feed. Ava frowned. That's cruel. It was, Elena said. But that sentence gave me hunger. Just not the kind they expected. Later that week, she got an email from her father. Elena, I don't expect forgiveness. But I see what you're doing. I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry for not being the father I should have been. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. She read it twice and smiled, small but real. She didn't reply right away.
She didn't need to.
Not yet. Because closure isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a quiet breath on a calm night. Her studio kept growing. The retreat filled with new stories. The land her mother bought? She never sold it. She expanded it, built a small community garden, an art room, and a patio under the stars where music sometimes played. And every night, before locking up, she'd stand outside the cottage, looking up at the dark sky filled with stars, and whisper, "I made it, Mom." She never raised Cassandra's rent again.
She never went back to that building.
Because real success isn't about showing them. It's about not needing